Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the adventure books that I absolutely love, and I tried to pick from different genres here. So there's a few classics, there's a few modern books, there's a few fantasy books, there's a few middle grade or YA books. So I tried to reach the whole gambit. So this month, for those who don't know, is August of Adventure. The whole point of August of Adventure is to read adventure books. So I thought today, because we're halfway done with the month, so it doesn't really matter if I give recommendations now because it's a little late and I'm sure everyone has already had their TBR picked out for like 3 weeks. However, today I'm going to be recommending some of my favorite adventure novels. I have 13 books here. Let's get to the books that I don't physically own first. So the first one is the Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. This book is exactly the way the title sounds. It's an adventure following a cat who is traveling around Japan and in many ways trying to find his place in life. It's a very moving and beautifully written book. It is much less of a traditional adventure novel than most of the books featured on this list. The next one is A Hero Born by Jin Yong. So Jin Yong is incredibly big in China for writing adventure novels, but most of his books, unfortunately, are not published in English, and my Chinese is definitely not good enough to pick up his books. So I was so thrilled when they translated this book, which is the first book of the Legend of the Condor Heroes. Set in the 1200s, it follows this young boy who is Chinese in the Song Dynasty. However, his father is murdered and he ends up joining and being raised kind of by Genghis Khan. And he starts from basically nothing and becomes a hero. So it's very much an archetypal story, very steeped in Chinese mythology. I believe it was originally written in the 50s, so technically it's a classic now. Now we go to nonfiction. I told you that we're all over the place with genres. And this one was particularly interesting to me when I first read it because it deals with missionary work and exploration, and it's called Through the Gates of Splendor, the event that shocked the world, changed a people, and inspired a nation by Elizabeth Elliot. So Elizabeth Elliot's husband, Jim Elliot, as well as 4 other men, went into Ecuador to try to do missionary work to this tribe that lived very, very deep in the rainforest. All of them ended up being murdered by this tribe. And so she wrote this book documenting both her husband's experiences before as well as understanding afterwards. And I really enjoyed how this tribe is not presented as like the archetypal villains. This tribe just had never been exposed to other people. Oh, these strangers are coming into our territory with these strange devices. They were taking pictures of them. And so they felt threatened, and they also didn't understand that they couldn't communicate because neither of them spoke each other's language. So there was definitely a barrier to that. So you can't blame the tribe necessarily because this was part of their culture. And yes, you can say, yes, it is morally wrong that they murdered these men. And of course it was horrific for everyone involved, especially since most of these men that were killed had families, had very young children. So it was a horrific incident that happened back in the 1950s. And it was also very interesting because Elizabeth Elliot, I believe it was her, but one of the wives to the men ended up living with the same tribe that had murdered their husbands and ended up having a very good relationship with those people. So it was a horrible situation that happened, but it wasn't necessarily anyone's fault. But it has very much adventure elements, but it's darker than most of the adventure books featured on this list, especially since it's nonfiction. Now we go to one that they are actually reading for August of Adventure, and I'm pretty sure they're reading it now because I think they finished Treasure Island. Not quite sure, but it is The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle. I think a lot of people assume Doyle just wrote Sherlock Holmes, and that is what he is famous for, but he did write quite a few adventure novels as well, and this series specifically centers around Professor Challenger, and there's a whole series. But however, I've only read this book. Basically, it follows this young man who's a journalist, and he gets snubbed by the woman he feels he's in love with, and so he decides to go on an adventure to South America, all the way across the sea. Like, he's in England right now, and he travels with this Professor Challenger, and of course they reach a mythical world where there's dinosaurs, and it's like a high plateau that for some reason evolution or like the extinction of the dinosaurs hasn't caught up with them. So it's a very interesting book. I highly recommend it if you like traditional adventure novels. All right, so the next one is Lord of the Rings. My husband and I have so many copies of this, and The Hobbit as well. Just the entire series is all about traveling and adventure and what happens on the adventure. If you didn't know, this one follows this ring of power that these little fantasy hobbits have to go and destroy in this dangerous territory, and they go with a group of individuals like a wizard and a dwarf and an elf, and it's basically D&D. And the whole point is to destroy the ring of power and save the world. And in this one, it's much lighter. It's about Bilbo Baggins, who's just this hobbit that wants to be left alone, but he gets rung into this group of dwarves that are going to take back their mystic mountain that was stolen from the dwarves many years before. All right, and then the next book we go to YA, and that is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I have not talked about this in a while. That's why I'm talking about it, because it is one of my favorite books of all time, and it was probably my favorite book when I was a teenager. This follows Sophie, who is this very drab hat maker. She's not someone that people would notice. However, a witch walks into her hat shop one day, decides to curse her to be an old woman, and Sophie decides she has to leave, and she ends up running into Howl, this wizard who is very eccentric and lives in a moving castle that flies around. But it's very cool how it works, because the front door, you can change the knob and you open it and it's in a different place. So you open it one way and you'll open to the flying castle. You open it another way and you're in this tiny portside village. So it's a really interesting way the world is created, but it's very much an adventure, because Sophie is someone who she wants a quiet life, and yet she gets pulled into this world of Howl and a demon who he fed his soul to. So interesting book. I love this book. All right, the next one is The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the only book I've read by Ursula K. Le Guin. This one follows Ged, who is this young village boy who is, in a sense, a chosen one. He leaves home. He finds he has these powers. He has a mentor. It's very traditional fantasy in many ways, but it's also got some twists that are very unique to fantasy. And he goes on an adventure, a fantasy adventure. It is a great book. I need to read the rest of the series. Let's get to a couple younger books. So the first one is The Two Princesses of Bamarre by Gail Carson Levine. So I know that Ella Enchanted is probably the most famous of Gail Carson Levine's books, but I think this one is so much better. It follows these two sisters, Meryl and Addie, and Meryl is very much outgoing and she's not shy. She wants to go on adventures, and Addie is very much quiet and demure. However, there's a disease going around their kingdom, because this is a kind of traditionally medieval world, and Meryl is the one that gets sick, and Addie is the one that decides to go on an adventure to try to save her sister. It has a bittersweet ending. I won't give too much away, but for being a more YA, almost middle grade type book, this is an exceptional book, and one that really moved me when I was younger, especially since it doesn't have the conventional happy ending that you expect of in like a princess type novel. The next one is also middle grade, and that is The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. So this book follows a group of extraordinarily resourceful individuals that sign up for this mysterious organization and have to solve mysteries. So they travel around and they have to solve different mysteries. I wouldn't say they're as much mysteries as they are adventures. They have riddles to solve. They have crimes to unearth. So it's very much a fast-paced, thrilling adventure book of following these very quirky and unique individuals. Now we've got to a few classics. So the first one is Crocodiles on the Nile by Elizabeth Peters. This is a cozy mystery, so quite a bit different from the rest. It's set in the late 1800s. It follows an Egyptologist and this very wealthy woman who travels to Egypt on vacation after she inherits a massive amount of money, Amelia Peabody, and she ends up running into this very crass and rude Egyptologist named Radcliffe Emerson, and of course they conflict, and there's romance, but there's also murder mystery, and they're also on a dig in Egypt. So there's a lot of adventurous elements to it, especially since Elizabeth Peters, whose real name was Barbara Mertz, was indeed an Egyptologist. She has some great nonfiction books about Egypt out there. I highly recommend you look her up if you're interested in Egyptology. However, these are just more like cozy adventure mysteries, and I love these. The next one is Call of the Wild by Jack London. And this one follows this dog who gets captured from his home in San Francisco, and I believe he is a Saint Bernard, and he gets taken up to the Klondike to be a sled dog, and so he's forced through these traumatic incidences. It's quite a dark book, but it's very much an adventure as you follow along with him and seeing how he finds happiness in the end. It's a great book, and it's also very short. When it comes to the next author, I decided to go with just one of his books, and it's not the book I usually talk about because I think all of his books are very much adventures and sci-fi, but but this one is, I would say, more quintessential adventure than a lot of the rest of his books, which dabble much more into sci-fi. So that is Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. So Jules Verne, my favorite book by him is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He wrote The Mysterious Island, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and all of those are very much adventures. However, this one is specifically less science-driven. So in a lot of his other books, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he very much gets into the science of everything. In this one, there's not as much science in there. So it follows this man, Phineas Fogg, who makes a bet at his elite London club that he can traverse the earth in 80 days. So he and his butler set out to go on this adventure, and there are hijinks ensues, there's madness, there's people that are trying to stop him from winning the bet. It's madness, and it's so much fun to read. I highly recommend this book, especially if you've tried to read other of Jules Verne's books and you really struggled with the science elements of his books. This one doesn't contain half as much science. And the last book, which I have talked about way too much, but I will continue talking about because I love it so much, that's The Explorer's Guild by John Ballard and Kevin Costner. Set just following World War I, it follows a group of dragoons who are seeking the mythical city of Shambhala, and it also deals with the Explorer's Guild, and which is this secret organization that has meeting places all over the world, and basically people meet there to exchange stories. It is a great book told in half graphic novel, half novel format. It's an exceptional book. I highly recommend it, and I will continue to recommend it until everyone on the internet has read it or everyone is sick of me talking about it. So, what are your favorite adventure novels? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!